Life, with its improbable coincidences and reunions that defy reason, sometimes weaves destinies that seemed concluded. After years of trying to escape the memories of a lost love, he finally believes he is ready to start anew. But the past, stubborn as it is, finds a way to return, not in words or dreams, but in a small detail capable of changing everything, a familiar pendant on the neck of the woman he had just met. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. When the sun crept through the blinds and settled on the table, Paul knew it was a new beginning. The contract was signed, the job was promising, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt a slight excitement vibrate in his chest. After the storm that had ravaged his life, any sign of light seemed like a miracle. He adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, observing the small lines that had appeared around his eyes in recent years, marks of a silent suffering that he carried like a constant shadow. His apartment, still with boxes unpacked, was functional and sterile, lacking the personal touches that transform a space into a home. He had left everything behind. The places that held traces of laughter, the sound of her name echoing through the halls, the photographs that followed him like silent ghosts. 2 years earlier, he had lost Emma in an accident that gave him no time for goodbyes. She had been his harbour, his promise, the tomorrow that would never come. When the world collapsed, Paul simply left. He moved to where no one knew him, seeking a fresh start he didn't believe he deserved. Emma and he had plans, a house in the suburbs, maybe children. She was a social worker, dedicated to improving the lives of vulnerable children, while he worked in financial data analysis. They complemented each other like parts of a whole that was now irreparably broken. Now, as he prepared for his first day at the new job, he breathed cautiously, as if fearing to awaken a sleeping heart. He wore the blue shirt that she liked, not out of superstition, but out of memory. The mirror returned a tired look, but there was something there. Perhaps hope, perhaps just survival disguised as courage. "You can do it, Paul," he murmured to himself, a ritual he had adopted on the toughest days. The new office was located in the city centre, in a modern building with a glass facade. The financial consulting firm was known for its innovative approach and collaborative environment. Paul hoped to find not just a job there, but a purpose that would distract him from the permanent absence he carried. At the reception, he was greeted by Melissa, a woman with a warm smile and calm efficiency. "Welcome to Horizon Financial, Mr. Mitchell. The HR department is waiting to finalize your documentation, and then Marco will show you your workspace." In the office, everything was new. The faces, the voices, the hurried steps. Paul introduced himself, met colleagues, and everyone seemed eager for the new manager's arrival. "She's amazing," they said. "She has a different energy." He smiled, trying to share the excitement. Marco, a senior analyst with grey hair and an easy laugh, guided him through the office. "This will be your desk. The team is excited about your arrival. We've heard great things about your work at Bennett & Associates." "Thank you," replied Paul, placing his briefcase on the clean desk. "I hope to meet the expectations." "I'm sure you will. Oh, and our new manager is arriving today as well. Claire Donovan, she's been transferred from the Western branch. They say she revolutionized that operation in just 1 year." Paul nodded, organizing his few belongings on the desk. A pen that Emma had given him on their first anniversary, a small digital picture frame he hadn't had the courage to turn on since the accident. Objects that carried invisible stories for others. At 10 a.m., a stir went through the office. Voices whispered, people adjusted their posture. Paul looked up from his computer, curious. But when the door opened and she walked in, time lost its rhythm. The woman walked with elegance and confidence, greeting the team with a serene smile. Brown hair at shoulder length, attentive eyes that seemed to assess everything with professional precision. There was something familiar in her demeanour, but it was the detail around her neck that made the ground disappear beneath Paul's feet. The pendant, silver with small leaves carved around a light blue stone, hung delicately over her blouse. The same pendant that Emma wore every day, the same one he had custom made, with their initials engraved on the back. The room spun. The murmur of introductions reached his ears distorted, as if he were submerged. When Claire approached to greet him, Paul automatically extended his hand, struggling to maintain composure. "Paul Mitchell, our new senior financial analyst," Marco introduced. "Paul, this is Claire Donovan, our new operations manager." "Pleased to meet you, Paul," she said with a professional smile. "I've heard excellent things about your work." "Likewise," he managed to reply, his eyes inevitably drawn to the pendant. For a moment Paul thought it was a hallucination brought on by longing, but when the metal's shine caught the light, he knew. It was identical. And it couldn't be a coincidence. The small engraved leaves, the light blue stone that Emma used to say, reminded her of the sky on perfect days. Detail by detail, it was the same. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Paul carried out his tasks mechanically, while his mind spun with theories and possibilities. Perhaps it was just a similar piece of jewellery. Perhaps the jeweller had produced more than one model. Or perhaps, and this possibility made his stomach sink, fate was playing the cruelest of tricks. He tried to convince himself that it was just a similar piece, a common model. Even so, his heart felt heavy. At the end of the workday, trembling, he casually commented on the pendant while they were in the elevator. The woman, whose name he then learned was Claire, seemed to hesitate. Then, with a rehearsed naturalness, she replied that it was a gift from her mother. She smiled briefly as if to close the subject, and moved away when the doors opened. Paul was paralyzed. There was something strange about that response, a subtle discomfort, a quick shadow in her eyes. That night, he couldn't sleep. The memories of Emma came back with full force. The day he gave her the pendant, how she was moved by the gift. "It's perfect, Paul," she had said with tears in her eyes. "I will wear it always." And she did, until the very last day. In the days that followed, the pendant became a torment. Every time Claire leaned over the table to show something, the sparkle of the stone hit him like a whisper from the past. And the more he tried to ignore it, the more the object called to him. He remembered every detail, the small marks he had commissioned on the sides, discreet, almost invisible. A jeweller had engraved them in the shape of two intertwined waves, a symbol representing the way he and Emma used to say they faced the tides of life together. And there they were, the same waves. During a team meeting, while Claire discussed strategies for the next quarter, Paul watched the pendant reflecting the light from the monitors. There was no doubt. It was the same one. The nagging question was, how had it ended up around the neck of his new boss? The sleepless nights returned. Paul revisited memories he had tried to bury. Her laughter, the wind in her hair, the promises that time had failed to keep. And now that necklace, the link between what was and what still held him. On a particularly difficult morning, after spending the night going through old photographs of Emma, Paul arrived at the office with deep circles under his eyes. The strong coffee in his mug barely disguised the fatigue. "Tough night?" Marco asked, stopping by his desk. "Just some personal issues," he replied vaguely. "Well, I've got news that might brighten your day. Claire was impressed with your analysis of the Richards portfolio. She said your approach was exactly what we needed." Paul felt a confusing mix of professional pride and personal discomfort. Claire was undoubtedly an excellent manager, fair, intelligent, with a clear vision of the company's objectives. Under different circumstances, he would be thrilled to work with someone so competent. But the pendant... Unable to bear it any longer, he decided to talk to Claire. He waited for an opportune moment, a break when she was alone. When he found her sitting in the company garden, enjoying a few minutes during lunch, he approached with a heart in turmoil. "Claire, can I sit down?" She looked up from the tablet, smiling cordially. "Of course, Paul. Any questions about the Latimer project?" He sat down on the stone bench, trying to organize the words he had rehearsed so many times. Actually, it's something personal. He took a deep breath. Sorry to intrude, but I need to ask about your pendant. Her expression changed subtly, an almost imperceptible tension at the corners of her eyes. My pendant? There was no script for what he needed to say, so he spoke honestly. He told her that he had a fiancée named Emma, who wore a pendant exactly like that one. He explained that he had ordered it himself, and that it was impossible not to recognize it. I am absolutely certain, he concluded, his voice choked with emotion. Look, there are 2 intertwined waves engraved here. He pointed to the sides of the pendant without touching it. And if we turn it over, we'll find the initials P and E engraved on the back. Claire listened in silence, her eyes wandering on the horizon. When he finished, she took a deep breath, and the expression on her face changed. The rigidity gave way to surprise. Slowly she touched the pendant, as if seeing it for the first time. She unbuttoned the clasp and turned the piece, revealing the initials Paul had mentioned. My God, she whispered. You are her Paul? Gradually, the pieces began to come together. She recounted that she had met Emma many years before when they were still teenagers. They had attended the same summer camp for 3 consecutive years and developed an intense friendship. We were inseparable until life took us in different directions. I went abroad to study, and we lost contact. Claire now spoke with restrained emotion. Years later, I tried to find her on social media, but she wasn't very active online. When I finally discovered her whereabouts through a mutual friend, I learned of the tragedy. Claire explained that she had tried to return for the funeral, but the flight was cancelled, and she arrived only afterward. Emma's mother, exhausted and sad, showed her some of her daughter's things, books, photos, mementos. Among them was the pendant. Claire recognized it, remembered when Emma wore it, and asked if she could keep it as a memento of her friend. The mother agreed, saying that Emma would have liked it to remain with someone who loved her too. She told me about you, Claire continued, with a sad smile. She said her daughter had finally found someone who completely understood her, but she didn't mention your name, and I never imagined... Paul was speechless. The shock gave way to emotion. Fate, with all its strange precision, had crossed the two through an object that carried so much love and condensed pain. I'm sorry, said Claire, gently touching his arm. If I had known, I would have looked for you. Or maybe... She hesitated. Maybe it was exactly how it should have happened. In that moment, the office, the garden, time itself, everything seemed distant. What remained was the heavy silence of those who share the same ghost. They began to look at each other with a different sensitivity. The bond, initially professional, began to be tinged with something more human, more intimate. In the following days they talked about Emma, about the past, about the marks that loss had left. Claire kept stories that Paul had never heard. Adolescent mischiefs, dreams shared under the camp stars, promises of youth. Each tale was like a new piece of the puzzle that was Emma, revealing facets he had never known. She had this crazy plan to one day open a support centre for troubled teenagers, Claire said during a lunch. She said she wanted to create the kind of place she herself would have needed as a teenager. Paul smiled, recognizing the essence of the woman he had loved. She never let go of that dream. We were saving up for it. Over time, the friendship became a constant presence. Lunches turned into confiding, and mutual admiration unfolded into something deeper. Yet both were apprehensive. There was a shadow hanging between them, the respect for Emma's memory. Paul feared that loving someone else would betray the woman who had taught him to love. Claire, on the other hand, bore the weight of being the friend who had come after, the one who held a piece of the same story. One night, after a work dinner with the team, Claire invited Paul for a coffee before going home. Sitting in a small cafe, she took the pendant off her neck. I think this belongs to you, he said, extending the jewel. Paul looked at the pendant shining under the yellowish light. So many memories contained in such a small object. No, he finally replied. Emma would like you to keep it. Claire hesitated, her eyes glistening with tears. Are you sure? Absolutely. She always said things find their way to where they should be. The feeling grew in silence, unhurried, like something that needed no promises, just time. Both carried similar scars, understanding each other's pain without the need for words. Paul realized that Claire, even without knowing it, was giving back to him something he believed he had lost, the ability to feel without guilt. She did not force him to forget, nor to replace. She simply reminded him that life, even when wounded, could still blossom. Until one day, destiny decided to speak again. Emma's mother fell ill. It was during a visit to the hospital that Claire found her by chance. The woman smiled upon recognizing her, and with the serenity of one who has lived through it all, held her hand. She said she knew how much Emma and Paul had loved each other, but she also knew how much her daughter would want him to live again. Emma always saw beauty where others only saw shadows, the lady said with a weak voice. She wouldn't want her memory to be a burden but a blessing. She said that if Claire's love helped him to breathe again, then Emma, wherever she was, would be smiling too. Those words released something within them. The guilt began to dissolve, giving way to gratitude. When Emma's mother passed away a few months later, Paul and Claire attended the funeral together. It was painful, but different. Not as before when grief had swallowed them, but rather like a gentle farewell. Blessed. On a spring afternoon, sitting in the same company garden where they had first talked about the pendant, Paul held Claire's hand. You know what I've been thinking? That centre for teenagers that Emma wanted to create. Maybe we could make it happen. Claire's eyes sparkled. It would be perfect, Paul. A way to keep her spirit alive. Years passed, and what began as chance became destiny. 3 years after that first day of work, Paul and Claire were married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by people who understood the path of new beginnings they had travelled. During the ceremony, Claire wore the same pendant, now not as a reminder of loss, but as a symbol of the connection between lives that time had intricately intertwined. The Emma Mitchell Community Centre opened its doors a year later, a welcoming space for young people in vulnerable situations where they could find support, guidance, and hope. The dream that had been born in camping conversations had finally taken shape. When the first daughter was born, they chose to call her Emma. The name seemed the most natural in the world, a tribute and a continuation. On quiet days, when the sun floods the room and the girls' laughter echoes through the house, Paul sometimes finds himself looking at the necklace around his wife's neck. The pendant still shines, but now it doesn't hurt. He learned that some pains don't need to be erased, they just need to be transformed. Love, he discovered, is not a territory that ends. It is a river that changes shape but never stops flowing. And if life taught him anything, it was that destiny doesn't repeat stories. It weaves them with new threads until what seemed like loss becomes rebirth. Because sometimes, to find love again, one must first go through grief and understand that certain souls do not return to stay. They return to pave the way for what is yet to come. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.